Welcome all. I am N. Naveen Kumar, an assistant professor at School of Social Sciences, University of Hyderabad. Welcome to lesson 4, Disaster Management in India. Introduction. The Indian subcontinent in general and India in particular is highly prone to natural disasters. Unique geoclimatic conditions have made India highly vulnerable to natural disasters. Floods, cyclones, landslides, drought and earthquakes are recurrent phenomenon in India. Vulnerability to natural disasters is compounded by frequent occurrences of man-made disasters such as accidents, fire and epidemics. This lesson intends to present an overview of disasters and disaster management in India. Objectives of the lesson: occurrences of disasters in India, impact of disasters and status of disaster management in India. India has been usually vulnerable to natural disasters on account of its unique geoclimatic conditions. Nearly 60% of the land area is likely to get earthquakes of various intensities. More than 4 crore hectares is affected by flood almost every year. Approximately 8% of the total land area is affected by cyclones and about 68% of the land area is vulnerable to drought. In the year 2009, along with China, Indonesia and Bangladesh, India stood at 4th position in ranking of usual occurrences of natural disasters. Since 1900 to 2011, India has faced 590 natural disasters. In 2009, 1,806 people were killed. 9 million people were affected by 15 natural disasters that occurred in India. Economic losses due to disasters in the year 2009 in India were estimated to be 2.7 billion US dollars. According to an estimate, India suffers considerably due to disasters. About 2% of its gross domestic product is lost. This is according to the Disaster Mitigation Institute. Of the 35 state and union territories in India, 27 are disaster prone areas. The state of Rajasthan is the most drought prone state of India. East coast of India is badly affected by cyclones, the other hazards. On the other hand, some of the cyclones originating from Arabian Sea strike the west coast of India, mainly the Gujarat and North Maharashtra. The storms that originate in the Bay of Bengal, most of them approach or cross the east coast in October and November. The Kutch and Andaman and Nicobar Islands and the Himalayan and sub-Himalayan regions are mainly earthquake prone area. With the exception of natural disasters, man-made disasters like fire, epidemics, industrial and transport disasters, conflicts, communal riots, road accidents leave a long trail of mortality and morbidity. More recently, urban India is facing major crisis with the increasing incidences of man-made disasters. Horrific events like blasts that shattered Delhi, the capital city in 2005, leading to 62 casualties, series of bomb blasts in local trains in Mumbai in 2006 killing 209 lives, and the terrorist attack in 2008 have caused a grave economic loss. Natural disasters in India 1900 to 2011, a statistical analysis. The occurrence of natural disasters increased after 2002, as out of 590 disasters, 27% disasters struck post 2002. Other factors like climate change, increasing urbanization, including growing concentrations of people in unplanned and unsafe urban settlements and exposed coastal areas, poverty, HIV prevalence and inadequate attention to changing risk patterns are placing more and more people in disaster prone positions. Additionally, the absence of disaster preparedness is seen as a major reason for large number and greater impact of natural disasters. It can be inferred from the above discussion that disasters destabilize development, achievements, impoverishing people and nations. This is due to destruction of social and economic assets, loss of production capacity, livelihood, damage to transport, communications, erosion of physical as well as social capital, which ultimately limit the development process. Underdeveloped countries, due to recurrent occurrence of natural or man-made disasters, are forced to use development funds and investment to handle the emergencies. In the absence of planned efforts to address root causes, natural as well as man-made disasters represent an increasingly serious obstruction to the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals. For example, displacement of people from one place to another place interrupts schoolings, which can be seen as direct impact of disasters. Loss of household assets could also lead to less affordability to avail educational facilities. This creates impediment in attaining Millennium Development Goals of achieving universal primary education. As per an estimate during 1990 to 2000, an average of about 4,344 people lost their lives and about 3 crore people were affected by disasters every year. The loss in terms of private, community and public assets have been astronomical. In 1988, 11.2% of the total land area was flood prone, but in 1998 floods inundated 37% geographical area. Frequent natural or man-made disasters lead to corrosion of development gains and limited options for the disaster sufferers. Physical safety, especially that of susceptible groups, is routinely endangered by disasters. In 1999, the super cyclone in Orissa and in January 2001, the Bhuj earthquake in Gujarat call attention to the need to take on multidimensional effort involving varied scientific, engineering, financial and social processes. Call for to adopt multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral approach and incorporation of hazard lessening in the development plans and strategies. These two major disasters have very clearly illustrated that we need multi-risk prevention, response and recovery plans for natural disasters, so that threat to human life and property is minimized. The natural and man-made disasters and crises generate hardships for the poor, who are chronically susceptible in terms of their access to resources, entitlements and livelihood support. In fact, the lives of the people in disaster prone regions, particularly the poor, are most completely insecure. Irrespective of the type of disaster, it is mostly the poor who are the worst sufferers. As per a study conducted in the year 2001, earthquake affected areas in Gujarat, most of the victims of the quake were the poor and marginalized, comprising the landless households, rural artisans and SC and ST people. Therefore, people from lower socio-economic status, the poor, should be the main target group for disaster management. Efficient disaster management requires multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary and holistic approach, encompassing pre-disaster preparedness initiatives, disaster response and post-disaster rehabilitation. all with active participation of local people living in hazard prone regions. It is a mockery that in many parts of India we have droughts and in many other parts we have floods occurring almost at the same time as every year. Sad commentary that despite several programs launched by the Government of India from time to time for minimizing these adverse impacts, natural disasters such as drought, floods and cyclones continue to haunt almost every year, affecting millions of people living in disaster prone areas of India, and unfortunately there is no national policy on disaster management. Irrespective of the type of disaster, it is mostly the poor who are worst sufferers. Disaster management in India. Disaster management is essentially a developmental problem, and thus any preparedness and mitigation planning will have to be taken up in keeping in mind the environmental concerns that the country is facing today. Natural or man-made disasters disrupt growth and wipe out the hard-earned fruits of conscientious developmental efforts, often pushing nations in pursuit for development back by a century. Therefore, well organized management of natural and man-made disasters rather than mere response to their occurrence has in recent times received increased attention both within India and abroad. This is as much a result of the recognition of the increasing frequency and intensity of natural and man-made disasters as it is an acknowledgement that good governance in a caring and civilized society needs to deal effectively with the devastating impact of disasters. The Government of India has set up a National Committee on Disaster Management under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister. The recommendations of this National Committee would form the basis of National Disaster Risk Management Program and strengthening the natural disaster management and response mechanisms. The high powered Committee on Disaster Management was earlier constituted in August 1999. The mandate of the high powered committee was to prepare disaster management plans at national, state and district level and also suggest strengthening the existing arrangements. The recommendations of the high powered committee relating to the distribution of relief and human resource development that primarily concerns the state have been communicated to the states for appropriate action. The Ministry of Home Affairs in the central government is the new nodal ministry for disaster management. In addition, disaster management is deemed to be state subject and different states have initiated efforts to strengthen their agencies responsible for disaster management. Orissa State Disaster Mitigation Authority and Gujarat State Disaster Management Authority were constituted after two major disasters that the respective states experienced. At present, the majority of states and union territories have set up their own disaster management authority to manage and monitor disasters in their respective regions. The programs formulated by the Disaster Management Authority essentially aims at strengthening community, local self-government and district administration's response. Preparedness and mitigation measures in some of the most vulnerable districts, along with states and national response. The key element of this program is establishing linkages between the government and civil society, response plans and capacity building of government institutions and the local self-governments in disaster mitigation, preparedness and recovery. Over the years, the Government of India has brought about a paradigm shift in the approach to disaster management. The new approach proceeds from the conviction that development cannot be sustainable unless disaster mitigation is built into the development process. Another cornerstone of the approach is that mitigation has to be multidisciplinary, spanning across all sectors of development. The new policy also emanates from the belief that investments in mitigation are much more cost effective than expenditure on relief and in rehabilitation. The present disaster management program envisioned by the Government of India reflects this paradigm shift. Panchayat Raj and urban planning institutions at all levels in the selected districts would be directly involved in the planning process to ensure sustainability of these initiatives. A wide representation of women envisaged in this project during the planning processes. Self-help groups of women in program areas would be directly involved in disaster risk management program. This project will work closely with the relevant government departments and institutions at the national and state levels. Learning from this program will feed into the national capacity building programs of the Government of India and the global knowledge base on disaster risk management. Disaster management occupies an important place in this country's policy framework, as it is poor and the underprivileged who are worst affected on account of calamities and disasters. The steps being taken by the government emanate from the approach outlined above. The approach has been translated into a national disaster framework covering institutional mechanisms, disaster prevention strategy, early warning systems, disaster mitigation preparedness and response, and human resource development. The expected inputs, areas of interventions, and agencies to be involved at the national, state and district levels have been identified and listed in the roadmap. This roadmap has been shared with all the state governments and union territories, administrations, ministries and departments of Government of India, and the state governments, union territory administrations have been advised to develop their respective roadmaps, taking the national roadmap as a broad guideline. There is therefore now a common strategy underpinning the action being taken by all the participating organizations and stakeholders. However, critics of India's disaster management plan argues that lessons aren't learned at great cost in India, as the knowledge attained from previous disasters is seldom reflected in the overall policy framework or in planning. The lessons learned from the Orissa super cyclone of 1999, the Latur and Gujarat earthquakes of 1993 and 2001 respectively, and other similar disasters have failed to induce a paradigm shift in our approach to disaster mitigation. Nor have we learnt lessons as to how to cope well with the disaster demands of regulating communities for safety, protecting the vulnerable people, especially in the areas exposed to disaster, empowering people's organization for transparency and decision making, and the right of the affected communities to necessary information. Summary: the Indian subcontinent in general and India in particular is highly prone to natural disasters. Due to unique geoclimatic conditions have made India highly vulnerable to natural disasters. Floods, cyclones, landslides, drought and earthquakes are a recurrent phenomena in India. According to an estimate, India suffers considerably due to disasters. Of the 35 states and union territories in India, 27 are disaster prone areas. The state of Rajasthan is the most drought prone state of India. East coast of India is badly affected by cyclones. The cyclones originating from Arabian Sea strike the west coast of India, mainly the Gujarat and North Maharashtra. The storms that originate in the Bay of Bengal, most of them approach or cross the east coast in October and November. The Kutch and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Himalayan and sub-Himalayan regions are mainly earthquake prone area. Man-made disasters leave a long trail of mortality and morbidity. The Government of India has set up a National Committee on Disaster Management. The recommendations of this committee would form the basis of National Disaster Risk Management Program and strengthening the natural disaster management and response mechanism. Model questions. Question 1. Describe the impact of natural disasters in India. Question 2. Disasters destabilize development achievements. Comment. Question 3. What is National Committee on Disaster Management? Question 4. Discuss the functions of High Powered Committee on Disaster Management. Question 5. Who prepares National Disaster Plan?